After graduating, I went into the Navy, and I was in there for 3 years. I was on sub-chasers. We were in the Atlantic trying to sink German submarines, but in the Pacific, where I was later in the war, and I was skipper of a small sub-chaser then, which was just doing invasion operations. So I got out of the service in early 1946 and went to work for a prefabricated housing company in western Massachusetts. And unfortunately, it was a very challenging job, and I learned a lot there, but they went broke in 2 years. And by that time, we had 2 small children and a third one on the way. And my very, very bright wife, Betty, said, you know, if I'm going to be raising children and you want to be in the construction business and there's 4 feet of snow on the ground in Massachusetts, we ought to get out of New England. And she was absolutely right. And when Johnny was a month old, we put the kids in the back seat and drove west. Anyways, we came into Arizona, and this was March of 1948, and the sunshine was out, and the orange blossoms were all over, and I got an offer for a job with Ed Barney, a local architect, writing specifications and supervising the field. And so we settled in, and then a year later, opportunity came to go with a general contractor, and that was what I really wanted to do. So I went with J.R. Porter, and things were happening pretty fast. But a year later, a fellow naval guy, Jim Phillips, called me up and asked me to go out for lunch, and he said, I'm getting out of a company that I've been in, partnership, and I'm going to have $20,000, and I'll loan you half of it if you want to start a construction business, building contractor, building business. Well, I hadn't had any better offers that week, so we jumped at it, and you know, we were in the right place at the right time, and I don't know whether it's anything but just plain dumb luck, but we were there, and the future was bright. Remarkably, we did $800,000 our first year in sales. It was mostly Safeway stores and school jobs, very simple construction projects. And at the end of the year, when we totaled everything up, we found we'd made $12,000. Now, $12,000 based on $800,000 of volume is about a 1.5% return. But if you look at what our initial net worth was of $20,000, $12,000 represents a 60% return on capital. So it was a good start. But the problem was that immediately thereafter the Korean War started. So the civilian construction really shut down. Just about that time, when we figured that we knew all about how to do military work, the Korean War stopped and there wasn't any more, so we had to turn around and look at other things. And we started looking selectively at things. Did a job for Motorola. We did a job for Air Research. They were the beginning of our high-tech work. We did Park Central shopping center, the first shopping center in the state of Arizona, right on North Central and Thomas Road. We were getting into obviously more complicated, more challenging work. Well, one of the big changes was that we got $1 million of new investment. Oregon Guarantee Trust Company decided that we had a lot of potential and there was a chance that we would grow and be a public company and they could be involved in that kind of thing. We started doing more complicated jobs. That's at the time we really started getting into hospitals, for instance. We've done, that is still a big part of our construction expertise and volume. But some other things we diversified in, because we had all this money, and you don't need money to run a construction company. Construction company is supposed to make money. So we were really looking for diversifications, and we got involved with a company called Roadway Inns. It's sort of a very low level motel type. And we were franchisee for 4 states. And did about 4 or 5, 6, 7 motels, and then they decided that we really wanted to upgrade this thing. we wanted to go into the kind of places where there are good shopping centers and places like that, and the motel wasn't the kind of thing to do. So we started a company called DoubleTree Inns, and that company grew, and I think that was in '69. After 10 years, we sold the company to the management team, and that was a good move. It brought in capital for us, about $1 million. We also started developing on our own some warehouses for our own for leasing and then selling after we got them developed, and we did a corrugator plant out on the west side, and we built some office buildings. But the real smart thing that we did was a lucky opportunity that came along. A little refrigeration wholesaler, refrigeration equipment, Arizona Refrigeration Supplies. And we bought it for about $400,000, and it's one of our great assets. Well, the scariest time was I had just bought out Jim Phillips and changed the name of the company to Kitchell Contractors and Kitchell Corporation. Then we began to realize that we had 2 big jobs. County complex down in downtown Phoenix, 2 square blocks, $9 million job, which today would be the equivalent of probably a $50 million job in the inflation we've had. But we also had a sewage treatment plant at the 91st Avenue that we made the mistake of bidding and getting, and it was going to lose a bundle, and the county complex wasn't going to lose, but we had taken some profit on the prior year that wasn't going to be there at the end of the job, so we had to reverse it out. And we, for the first time, had a loss, and it was a big loss. It was a very worrisome time. I sometimes didn't know whether I was going to have a company when I woke up the next day. But we kept working at it and got out of it. But it was woolly. But you have those ups and downs, and you have to be prepared for them. What was the mistakes that we made? And one of them was we took 2 great big jobs at the same time, way beyond the scope of anything that we had done up until then. So that in other words, be careful when you reach, that you don't reach big, and then don't reach also big in a something you don't know much about, have never done it before, and the sewage treatment plant. was one. And I guess it's just have a planned growth, but don't have it go too fast. Kitchell was one of 4 companies in the United States who really started developing construction management. That's a system of your relationship and how you give services to the owner. It is different from the competitive bid methods. And there was a lot of inflation at the time, and there was a lot of bidding that was disastrous because the bids were all too high. So Bernie and I started working out how we would do construction management, and we then called up, I think it was the Goldwater's people, Goldwater's department store, and said, would you have lunch with us? And we asked them, how did your last project? I think they had one building in Tucson and something that we weren't involved in. And when the blue smoke cleared, I mean, they said everything went wrong, and it was a disaster. And so we said, well, why don't you let us be your construction manager and hire us at the same time that you hire the architect, or before. Either before it'll help you pick an architect. And they jumped at it. And we started doing this, and it just took off, and it's one of our great assets. All of the information that they were putting together during the design phase, the public arena clients don't have any access to it. And a school district down in Tucson had a very complicated expansion of their facilities, and they had ended up with about 15 different schools and about 6 different architects. And they came to us and say, we don't know how to manage something like this. We don't have people to do that. Can't you give those services to us that you're giving to in your construction management? So we decided that the way to do the thing was set it up as a professional organization, basically like an architect or an engineer, and we would provide those services, same services, to the school districts, to prisons, to courthouses, and convention halls, and government office buildings, and so on. And it worked. Every once in a while, when we're talking to new employees, one of them says, Mr. Kitchell, did you ever think that Kitchell Corporation would get as big as it is today? And of course the answer is, hell no. The best move I've ever made is to share the ownership of the company with the key people. And that came about as part of the buyout of Jim Phillips. I offered at that time shares of stock at the same price I was buying from Phillips to key people in the company. You can do a much better job of managing a company if you can do it in a logical and looking at the long range rather than having to look at the short range all the time. Well, I think Kitchell has prospered through the ups and the downs because of, number one, the quality of the people. That when we get into a down, we just get in there and dig ourselves out and find ways to find ways to solve those problems and get work someplace and make money. I think the fact that we have a great diversification, that's carried us through all kinds of times when we weren't making as much as we should in the construction business. We have such depth of people that we're going to keep right on going, and we control our destiny because we're not a public company. We're not for sale. People can come to work for us and stay a long time and be involved in the success, the financial success with our profit sharing plan and our ability to and the opportunity in certain cases to buy stock, and so I think the potential is marvelous.